Belts, belts, belts. Let's talk about accessory belts, V-belts, serpentine belts. What's the difference? So just a real quick breakdown so you were understanding of the terminology here. I've got listed V-belts, accessory belts, drive belts, serpentine belts, timing belts. I will tell you that the name is going to depend on the type of system that it uses, as well as the type of belt that is used. So real quick, I'd like to show you, we've got a belt that's clearly bad, but you can see on the inside, we call those long lines ribs. We have other belts that don't have any ribs at all. And if we look at this belt here, looking underneath it, it just sort of looks like a square, but it's actually not, because if you cut it in half, it looks like a V, kind of. It's shaped a little bit V-ish, so you can see the bottom is narrow, and that's so it stays in a pulley. Other belts have teeth instead of ribs, and those teeth look something like that on the inside. But you'll notice all the belts are pretty much all smooth on the outside surface. That is so we can run through a pulley system. Belts on belts on belts. So V-belts are a particular style of belt that is used. I showed you guys the one that looks like a V. Accessory belts can be of the rib design, of the tooth design. What accessory and V-belts have in common is that V-belts are accessory belts. V-belts are just a type of belt that gets used for accessories. Well, what the heck are accessories? Accessories are things like your air conditioning, your power steering pump, your alternator even, or even a water pump. Auxiliary things outside of the engine that need to use the engine's rotating force to turn. So our air conditioning needs our engine rotating force to turn the air conditioning. The power steering pump needs the pump to be turned by the engine rotating assembly. So this whole setup is the front of an engine that we're looking at here. This is also the front of an engine. So down here at the bottom, we always have our crank pulley. Our crank pulley is the big fat pulley at the bottom on the front of the engine. And from there, we're going to use all the power that comes from that crank pulley to turn everything else. An accessory system means that I've got a different belt for something different. So I've got one belt for my air conditioning. I've got one belt for my power steering. I've got one belt for my air conditioning. I've got one belt for my alternator. And each of those belts are going to turn off of the crank pulley on the bottom, and they're going to turn what their accessory is. That would be an accessory system. Older vehicles use that. We went away from an accessory system because that's a lot of extra belts and a lot of extra things that need to be replaced, to what we call a serpentine or drive belt style system. This system will generally use the ribbed style belts that I showed you right there, and is what looks like in this picture here, where it's one belt to rule them all. So we've got our crank pulley down here, and our belt comes off and runs this pulley over here, potentially power steering, this pulley over here, which is our alternator, down through a tensioner pulley of some sort, over through our air conditioning pulley, another idler pulley, and this is actually probably our tensioner pulley here. But we've got some idler pulleys that are just simply placeholders to keep tension on the belt and keep it in place. The one belt is generally going to be very large in nature, as you can see here, versus an accessory V-belt might look something like this, or a tooth belt like that, right? In comparison, this belt's much larger, but again, one belt to rule them all. We only have one serpentine belt or one drive belt. So depending on the kind of system is going to depend on how you're going to replace it. However, they're all going to get inspected with similar scrutiny, in that we're looking for things like ripping on the edges or fraying on the edges. We're also looking for excessive cracking on top or underneath. However, I will tell you that cracking on ribbed belts, light cracking, so we'll go ahead and sort of get a little closer there, that's normal, believe it or not. So don't say, oh, this belt's bad because it's cracking. Most belts, if your V-belt's cracking, it's bad. But the ribbed belts have a tendency to sort of do that. What you really want to look for is these ribs will wear down like a tire wears down. And they actually make a gauge. I don't have it handy with me here, but I did give you guys a picture, I believe, in the next slide. So we're checking for cracks, frayed edges, and if it's worn out. So here is Napa. Any of your auto parts store will have a dry belt or serpentine belt tool that will tell you how much it's worn out. So it's sort of an orange little circle that has a line coming out of it, and you're going to take that little sort of tang that comes off of it, and you're going to set it inside the ribs. If the ribs are worn down, this will stick out above the ribs. If this is flush with your ribs, you're still good. So it's very much like tire tread. But again, excessive cracking is not good, even on our rib style belts. So when do you know the belts are good or bad? I just did mention fraying, cracking, things like that. But also when you start to get that belt squeal, that right? That squealing sound can either come from a belt or it can potentially come from one of these pulleys, because these pulleys, they spin. Anything that spins is going to have a bearing, and anything that has a bearing, that bearing can go out. So if you get that squeal, how can you tell if it's a bearing or a belt? I will give you a hint. You can do one of two things. You can buy belt dressing from the auto parts store. It comes in a spray can. And while the belt is spinning around the ribs here, you can go ahead and spray inside that belt as it's turning on the engine. And if the noise dissipates, it's the belt. You have a worn out belt, and the belt's essentially doing a burnout on your pulleys. So you need to replace the belt or check your tension, because the tension might just be bad. If you don't want to buy anything from the store, you can use candle wax. Candle wax on the inside, not the outside of the belt, because it'll slip off then. Candle wax on the inside of the belt will do the same thing as belt dressing. The belt squeal may go away. That doesn't mean the belt squeal is fixed. It simply helps you eliminate where the problem is. So know that that is a Band-Aid on a problem that will need to eventually get fixed. Now let's say you do that and the squeal doesn't go away. You will more than likely have a pulley bearing problem. So, well, how many of the 20 could possibly be bad? Here's my trick. Take a piece of vacuum hose, clean vacuum hose. Doesn't matter what size. I mean, you don't need a radiator hose. But a small vacuum hose, one end's going to go to your ear. The other end's going to go to each pulley to see which one is the loudest. And when you reach the one where that squeal is super loud, I know that's the bearing I need to have fixed. So that would be just a quick and cheap and easy way to sort of diagnose between a belt or a pulley. The next thing to inspect is going to be hoses. And I gave you guys some good pictures that you probably can't see here very well. But when you are checking, when you're checking your hoses, first and foremost, let's talk about what hoses do. The ones that we're going to be paying close attention to are going to be coolant hoses, either going to and from the radiator, so those are called our radiator hoses, or they're going to and from the the passenger compartment on the backside of the firewall. Those are going to be your heater hoses. But if we are looking at our hoses, what are we looking for? So we're looking for external cracking. We're looking for any kinking of the hose. These are a great example of somebody who used hoses that were not the proper application and they sort of force fitted them. If I get any bulging or swelling or any bubbles in my hoses, especially with the vehicle running, they are definitely bad. But there's one or two more things that you can check for. Go through the vehicle and actually squeeze the hoses. If they are super soft and squishy, they're bad. They are ticking time bomb and you should replace them. If they are crunchy, like there are cornflakes inside of them, they are bad and you should probably replace them. If they are super hard and brittle, they are bad and you should probably replace them. These are these sort of things that cooling hoses have a tendency to go out on you when it's least convenient, like on your way to Vegas or some long trip where You might know what the problem is, but you can't poop out a coolant hose, so good luck on paying ridiculous prices on whoever is selling you the coolant hose in the middle of nowhere. So check these before you go on road trips. Check these before you are planning to drive a super far away place. It will save you a whole lot of hassle. But that's what you're looking for. If I see any crusty white residue on any of these hoses, I know I've got a leak. Again, should take a closer look at that. Some hoses may have a spring inside. That spring is to keep it from collapsing. It's not a bad thing. So when you go to squeeze it and you feel something hard inside the hose, it's probably that spring. Also, last thing, never, ever, ever replace a hose with something that is different from whatever that hose is. So I'm not going to replace a coolant hose with a oil hose or a fuel line with an oil. Well, that may actually work, but a fuel line with a coolant line or vice versa. I'm never going to use a vacuum line as a coolant line, so on and so forth, because that is it's a recipe for disaster because they are not rated for that chemical. And so what will happen is if I use a coolant hose that for something that's meant for, let's say, for an oil line, that oil traveling through is going to break down that coolant hose and eventually it will just melt and fail. So always replace hoses with hoses that are rated for that fluid. So a coolant hose with a coolant hose, fuel line with a fuel line, vacuum line with a vacuum line, so on and so forth. But that's how you would check your hose. The job of our air filter is to clean the air coming into the engine so our engine has nice clean air free of debris. I'd love to tell you that your air filter is always located in the same spot, but again, much like your battery, they are located in different places depending on the type of vehicle. On a carbureted or throttle body style injected vehicle, we're looking at air filters that are big and bulky, and in the center of everything, those are those round sort of filters that you guys are going to see. Most modern filters, anything that is not throttle body injected or carbureted, like port fuel injected or gasoline direct injection, you're going to have an air filter in a housing somewhere probably close to the front of one of the corners, either passenger side or driver side of the vehicle. It will have a plastic housing that's sitting on top of it, and it's going to look like a sort of a big black box usually. And that box will be held on, the top of that box will be held on usually with, 4 or 5 screws or bolts you can take off. And just like this picture, you should be able to lift off the housing and check your air filter. The air filter should be clean and free of debris. If it's not, that's your opportunity to change it. Do not ever take compressed air and blow out the air filter. What will happen is you will start to actually damage the air filter and blow particles of the air filter out, which will allow larger pieces of debris to come in. So not a good idea. While we're here, unless it's a K&N filter, don't try to wash your filter. K&N filters are made of special material that you use a special cleaner with and a special oil wicking material. If it's not one of those filters, don't try to clean your air filter. It's not going to work out well for you. It's a sort of a papery material. So just make sure you actually just go ahead and replace it. Now, while you are checking your air filter, this would be a great opportunity to check your air piping. So any of that plastic or rubber piping that travels from your air filter to the engine, if there are any cracks in that you might not normally see unless you take a closer look, that can cause some engine drivability issues. It can cause stalling. It can cause hesitation. It can cause fuel mileage issues. So just sort of keep that in mind when you're checking your air filter. Also check your intake piping and anything that's connected to your air filter. That's your sort of opportunity. While we're talking about this, some vehicles do have a cabin air filter that is behind the glove box. Some vehicles it's easy to get to, some vehicles it's not. So I do highly recommend you look at service information to check that filter. Some vehicles don't even have cabin air filters, while some vehicles do. Cabin air filters are going to be filters that filter air coming into the cabin. Some vehicles have this to sort of keep the air coming in fresh and clean. Others don't have them at all. So it really depends on your make and model. But again, service information is going to help you locate and figure out how to check that one, because those are different from your make and model. Tires are another common one that we are going to sort of check, and this one's easy because you don't even have to pop the hood to check this one. A quick visual inspection around your tires is going to do you a whole lot of good every once in a while. So what are we looking for? I'm going to get to tire tread in a minute, but aside from tire tread, I gave you guys some pictures of some gnarly bubbles in the sidewall. If you have bubbles in the tire, that tire is bad. There's no coming back from that. It's damage. Think of it like a hernia, right? When your muscle, that mesh, is not necessarily working the way it's supposed to, and so things sort of slip through. That's how the bubble in the tire works. Dry rot is when we actually start to get cracking all around the sidewall and the tread. You don't want that. Cracking means the tire is A, too old, or it's had too much UV damage, and you are going to exponentially increase your risk of a blowout. So if you're starting to get cracking on your tires, I would recommend to start saving some money so you can eventually get some tires that are not cracked. And then your tire pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a real quick trick for a couple of things. So your tire pressure obviously is going to go on the valve on the tire, just like a bicycle tire. Where are you going to find the tire pressure specifications, you ask? That is going to be on the sticker on generally the driver's side front door jamb. There's going to be a sticker. They call this the cold tire specification placard. And it'll tell you on your front tires not only the tire pressure that it should be, but it'll also tell you what size tire you should be running stock. This is also tire pressure for stock tires. So it's generally going to be a nice happy medium for traction and handling, as well as comfort and gas mileage. So if we'll talk a whole lot more about tires here in the next few weeks. But this is sort of just the beginning. So this is how you would check your tire pressure. Do not go off of the tire pressure that is labeled on the side of the tire. If you do that, you will overinflate your tire. That is the max PSI that it ever should be, not the tire pressure that is recommended. The tire pressure that is recommended, again, for gas mileage, handling, comfort, all that, that's going to be on the cold tire pressure specification placard. Okay? It'll also give you specifications for your spare tire as well, so that's sort of nice. Now back to our initial tire tread. Tire tread is going to be the lines that are cut out in your tire, the part that meets the actual road. That tire tread, again, we're going to get more into this later, but in a nutshell, that tire tread's there for water. If it didn't rain and we weren't going to travel through water ever, you wouldn't need tire tread. You could run racing slicks wherever you go, but that's not the case. You're going to go through puddles, we're going to get rainy days, and you're going to need tire tread to help dissipate the water. Well, when that tire tread starts to wear out, that's how you get what we call hydroplane. When you go over water and that water stays underneath that tire, now I have no traction on the road and I crash. That's bad, right? So there is a minimum specification for how much or how deep that tire tread is. So you can either use one of these handy dandy tire tread gauges. Those are nice, but most people don't have them. What most people do have is a penny. So here's what you can do. There's something called the penny test. You're going to take your penny and you are going to turn it upside down, kind of like I've got here. See how Lincoln's head's facing upside down? Well, the distance between the top of that penny and the top of Lincoln's head is actually 3/32 of an inch. That may not mean much to you now, but wait for it, there's more. The legal limit that your tire tread depth can be, and yes, I said legal, you can be pulled over for your tire tread depth not being deep enough. And they have to do this because if everybody was running around on racing slicks with no tread or burnt out tires, we're going to have all kinds of accidents everywhere. And so it is important that we have this rule. But be careful because that could get you pulled over. you're going to stick your penny upside down in the tire tread where the lines are. The tire tread should go past Lincoln's head. If it does not, if you see in the picture that I gave you guys there, if it does not go past Lincoln's head and you can still see the top of Lincoln's head with the penny all the way in the tread, you need to get new tires because that is lower than 3/32 of an inch, which again is the legal limit. So get your pennies out and check your tires out, make sure you're all good. But in a nutshell, that's how you're going to look at tires. We will get into a whole nother lecture section on just tires, so just you wait. Windshield wipers are pretty easy to inspect. You're just going to sort of lift the arm up, and what you're looking for is the rubber still pliable. Is it sort of stripping apart? Because if it's stripping apart, obviously it needs to be replaced. Are my windshield wipers streaky or squeaky? Do they chatter a lot even when I'm using fluid? Because if they're dry, they are going to chatter. Here's what I recommend. They've got all kinds of fancy brands at AutoZone and O'Reilly that are just screaming, buy me, buy me. I'm going to be nice and smooth. And they never are. You will never go wrong with factory wipers. And tell me if I'm wrong. Email me and say, hey, Ms.A, I bought factory wipers and they suck. I've never had it happen. I will say that every vehicle I own, I have factory wipers on. On my Tahoe, I've got AC Delco wipers. On my Civic, I've got Honda wipers. On the Porsche, I've got Bosch wipers. Everything is going to get factory wipers. Why? Because they're so smooth and quiet. They're like butter. You won't have wipers like them, no matter how much you paid for your Rain-X Fancy Pants wipers. So that's just my tech tip to you. They're always the way to go, in my opinion, without overspending, because they're usually not even that expensive. But you will need to go to the dealership to get them. So that's essentially what we're looking for in a nutshell. It is good practice to probably replace your blades every 6 months to a year. Some people will do it every rainy season, whatever works for you, but customers don't know that they need them until they need them. And so as a technician, you should always keep an eye on the wiper blades and let the customers know when it's time for new wipers. Parking brakes are really easy to check. So older designs, you would, okay, let's sort of back up here. Parking brakes come in, I'm going to go ahead and say about 4 designs. One that a lot of you guys are familiar with in the center console is a pull-up handbrake. I think we've got a picture right here, is your pull-up handbrake, right? And it clicks on its way up. Another one is going to be a foot pedal down on the bottom left when you're sitting in the driver's seat. The third is going to be a handle, and this one's used by Toyota, especially on their older trucks. Underneath the dash, it's a T-handle that you're going to pull out, and it's going to stick out with the parking brake engaged. The fourth one is going to be an electromechanical parking brake where you push a button, an electric motor in the back brake is going to engage your brake. Those are the 4 different designs. I will tell you how to vaguely inspect most of those designs. The first one, if you have a click type where it's this design or this design or this design that clicks, if it clicks, what you're looking for is at full engagement. You don't surpass between 2 to 7 clicks. If it only clicks once, then it's too tight. If it clicks over 7, and you can, this may vary on vehicle manufacturer, but about 7, if I increase my clicks past 7, that means that my parking brake is too loose and needs to be adjusted. But most of your parking brakes don't click anymore. Those are older designs. A lot of them are mechanical or electromechanical, or they're the foot pedal design where there is no clicking. So how do you check your parking brake? Here's what I recommend. Go ahead and take your car to a sort of hilly area. Make sure your service brakes work. And go ahead and apply with the vehicle in neutral. Foot on the brake, pop it in neutral. Apply your parking brake with the other foot or hand, however it's applied. And again, in neutral on a hill with nothing behind you or in front of you. Slowly start to let off your service brake, meaning your actual brake. If with your parking brake engaged, it still rolls, your parking brake needs to be adjusted. If your parking brake holds, how long does it hold? Does it hold for at least 5 minutes in that position, fully applied on a hill? If it does, your parking brake is good. But that would be the most general and easiest way to check it. Every vehicle manufacturer has their own little way and specification on checking it, but that's a nice, easy one I like to use. So that's how you would check a parking brake. Always, 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 when a vehicle comes into your shop, you are going to check the vehicle lights. All of them, headlights, turn signals, hazards, reverse lights, all that fun stuff. Because that's a safety thing. And the last thing a customer wants to do is leave your shop, especially after paying $500, $600, $700 of you working on something else, or even $300 or $400. They don't want to leave your shop with a broken tail light and get pulled over by the cops. Legally, you are obligated to check tire pressure, by the way. Car comes into your bay, boom, got to check tire pressure. You are not legally obligated to check lights, but you really, really should, and your customers will appreciate you for it. So obviously your headlights, you've got 2 of them. Tail lights in the back, you've got 2 of them, and those will come on with your headlights. Your brake lights, you legally are supposed to have 3 of them. 1, 2, 3 brake lights. Your right, left, and a third brake light of some sort that may be on a wing or part of the trunk. Obviously, your turn signals, front and rear, your reverse lights, you may need a friend to help you out with this one. Don't try to do that on your own. And then, of course, your hazards, which mean, I'll give you a hint, your turn signals will all come on, all 4 if you just use your hazards, so that's sort of a one and done check right there. So always check your vehicle lights. You'll get used to it. And the more you do it, the more you just automatically do it. And cars going down the street, right brake light out, third brake light out, left brake light out, turn signal out, whatever it might be. We made it to the end of inspections. I really, really hope that this one of all of the presentations so far has inspired you guys to look under your hood and get better acquainted with your car. If you haven't already, please do that. I can't recommend it enough. The only way that you're going to learn this stuff is by utilizing it. And since I can't have you guys here with me, I will take what's second best, and I'd love to hear any feedback from you guys for when you do your own inspection. Hey, I checked my oil and I found out that I need an oil change, or that I have a blown head gasket, or I need to change my coolant or my automatic transmission fluid or my air filter. I would love to hear what you guys are finding on your cars. And in fact, I will actually probably ask you guys in the discussion to see what you guys think. Mom's car, dad's car, brothers, sisters, get out there, pop a hood, and do a vehicle maintenance inspection or a basic vehicle inspection. There's so much that you may find out. So I will see you guys in the next video.